after the pandemic, this heyday of documentary filmmaking, budgets that were skyrocketing, and those days have dropped a little bit.
You should first have a good sizzle, a good deck, and a website and a social media presence. We bought all our own equipment. Word of advice for young filmmakers, whatever you could afford so you could film yourself.
The executives at all of the streamers who you might think are buying up lots of documentaries are actually not, and the ones that they are, they're receiving hundreds of pitches a day. You need to identify a non-traditional funding list of the people who care about this thing. Show how your project will advance that cause as opposed to the film itself.
Curious about creating high-quality YouTube videos? Enroll in video editing and production classes at Manhattan Edit Workshop to sharpen your skills and turn a hobby into a career. Start your journey to becoming a pro today.
Hey, this is Josh Apter from Manhattan Edit Workshop. I'm welcoming you to Sight, Sound, and Story, Directing and Producing Documentaries. This is episode 51 of the series. It always kind of freaks me out that we've done so many of these. I will tell you that there's about 1,000 more on our YouTube channel, so please go check it out. It's just an incredible wealth of information and entertainment on editing and directing and cinematography, and we're just really happy to have it out there, and we want to share it with you. So take a look at any time. Tonight's episode is great. It's like a trifecta of documentary filmmakers. We have Jeremy Workman, an old friend of ours, moderating, editor and producer Jill Campbell, and Nicholas Bruckman. These are all like incredibly talented Swiss Army knives of nonfiction talent. They're going to talk about capturing real life moments to shape stories that resonate with audiences and the challenges that they face and everything in between. So I hope you enjoy the event. Sit back, relax. I will thank our sponsors, ACE, American Cinema Editors, AJA, Edit Stock, and Filmmaker U, of course. And then I have to thank Jason Banky and Janet Dalton. I always do, because they're the ones making this look easy, and all I have to do is come in here and make it through my opening and my closing. So without further ado, like us, subscribe to us, tell us if there's something that you want to see in the future. Sit back, relax, and enjoy Sight, Sound, and Story, episode 51, Directing and Producing Documentaries.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, I'm Jeremy Workman. I'm very excited to be chatting today and doing this panel about documentary filmmaking. This is, I think, our first time where we've actually just like focused on doc filmmaking with documentary filmmaking directors. So this is super, super exciting. I know all the time folks ask both, the group and us and me, and also this channel about, kind of talking more about documentary filmmaking and kind of seeing behind the curtain a little bit. So I'm really excited today to dig into that with you all, and I really appreciate you guys all watching. We have two really cool documentary filmmakers here, and we're gonna kind of illuminate the whole process of documentary filmmaking directing and get into all kinds of topics about making docs and directing docs and what it all means. I'll first introduce myself. I'm going to be kind of like the moderator, but also one of the participants too. Folks here maybe remember me because I've also moderated other panels, but this is also a really special one because it's about my own subject. So I'm especially excited for that. My name is Jeremy Workman. I'm a documentary filmmaker. This year I released probably my biggest movie, which is called Secret Mall Apartment, which was released in, it was in theaters for months. So it was this great success for us. We released it in about 250 theaters. Played for 6 months, as I mentioned. It had a very robust film festival circuit. It was on the circuit for a while, and then it went out this year, and everybody could check out Secret Mall Apartment. It is now on what's called TVOD. You guys have probably heard about this, where you could now rent it on Apple and iTunes, and we're excited to now show it to everybody out there. Previously, I had also done a couple other feature docs. I did one called Lily Topples the World. That premiered at the South by Southwest Film Festival. It's a documentary about the world's greatest domino toppler, Lily Hevish. And that was a neat movie because it was one of those we played at a film festival and then there was a big acquisition for it from Discovery and people could watch that movie on HBO Max. And then I've also done a couple other movies, including a fan favorite called The World Before Your Feet, which is about a guy walking every street in New York City. And that movie played at a lot of film festivals and now is all over on streaming sites and whatsoever. And so I guess I have a very, feel like a firm grasp on documentary filmmaking in general. I also shoot a lot of my stuff. Sometimes I edit my stuff and just very involved in the day-to-day aspects of documentary filmmaking as a whole. So I'm very excited to introduce our two other panelists today. Both are great filmmakers and both have films that have kind of dropped this year as well, feature films. And we have Jill Campbell and Nick Bruckman, who wants to sort of start. I usually try to break the ice a bit and ask each of you to kind of give your own bio. So why don't you do that? Jill, you want to start that?
Sure. It's great hearing your bio because I've seen all your films and big
Thanks.
fan. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I started out actually in the theater. I was a playwright with plays produced off Broadway and at La Mama and kind of on the fringe and kind of did experimental theater too. And fell into documentary filmmaking about 20 years ago and have been obsessed since. Kind of took what I learned working in the narrative world and incorporated it into the doc world. I've produced many docs and I've directed three features. My first one was called Mr. Chibbs about NBA player Kenny Anderson, and he was in a midlife crisis, 15 years post retirement, and we followed him. It was like a cinema verite exploration of his life and career. My second film was called C-20D about a mother who lost her child on the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 in Lockerbie, Scotland. And she was an artist, and it was about how she used her art to help her through her grief. And then my film that is on the festival circuit right now, or just started streaming on VOD, is called Beyond the Gaze, Julie Campbell's swimsuit issue, and that's also my kind of biggest film to date. And it's about the founding editor of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, Julie Campbell, who's also my mother-in-law, and it's a biographical documentary about her life and career. It also has verite about her dealing with her own mortality in her 90s as she looks at death.
Yeah, incredible movie too.
Thank you.
Just
Thank
really
you.
just incredible how it kind of balances between this career as with the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue that everybody knows, but also this very kind of, hyper focused personal story of this woman and her career. Just really incredible. Yeah, everybody should check out Beyond the Gaze.
Thank you. Well, it's on
Sure.
VOD right now, streaming at
Nice.
Apple, Amazon, Canopy, all the places where yours is streaming. I see your
Nice.
phone pop up next to mine as
Oh,
I
awesome. That's
do the
great.
search, which is awesome. So,
And Nick, tell us a little about your background.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy and Jill. Great to be here and do this. I am also a Jeremy Workman super fan and have been for many years, so it's a delight to do this. I'm Nicholas Bruckman. I'm a documentary director as well. I've been making films since I was 7 years old with my mini VHS camcorder and editing on the double VHS deck all the way through today, and in a variety of hats and capacities. But in terms of a filmography, I've directed four feature-length documentaries slash docuseries. One called La Americana that told the story of a young undocumented immigrant from Bolivia and her journey from Bolivia to New York City to take care of her ailing daughter and her return home after 7 years of separation for her daughter's quinceanera. So a sort of intimate look at the immigration crisis at the time, and of course continues today. I directed a feature documentary called Not Going Quietly that was at the SXSW Film Festival, South by Southwest, alongside yours, Jeremy,
It was. It's a good
in
one.
2021, and the virtual edition. I think we competed for various awards that we
Mm.
both took home some of. And that film was about a celebrated healthcare activist named Adi Barkan, who, after being diagnosed with ALS, leads a national movement of healthcare activists and disabled folks to confront their representatives and fight for universal healthcare on his last road trip as he prepares to leave a better world behind for his son. And that film also had a very long festival and awards life and multiple Emmy nominations and a nationwide theatrical release, which was a great experience. And I learned a lot through the process. And more recently, I directed a feature documentary about the NFT boom and bust, the non-fungible token phenomenon called Minted, The Rise and Fall of the NFT. And that film premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival, was broadcast on Independent Lens, and then earlier this year was picked up by Netflix in 100 countries, which was great. So it's got some wide visibility there. And it's a very intimate lens on the artists who were leading the forefront of the NFT art movement before it all came crashing down. And this year at the Tribeca Film Festival, I premiered a new docu-series that I co-directed with our mutual friend Yoni Brook called The Price of Milk. And it is the untold story of the 1990s Got Milk campaign. So some relevance to big pop culture moments like your work, Jill. And I also run a documentary branded film production company called People's Television based in New York City and DC, where we try to help organizations and foundations and social movements translate their work and impact onto screen with great documentary filmmaking.
Incredible. Yeah, Nick's stuff is really, really terrific. Everybody should seek it out. An easy one would just go watch Minted on Netflix, which is terrific. Jill, when you're like beginning like a project or thinking about like could this be a documentary? Like everybody often asks me like how does it work? Like do you first like come up with the character, or is it an issue, or is there a question? Like how do you even find a new project? And
I
then
mean,
how do you know if there's enough to it for a movie?
that's such a great question. And it's really the most important question because, mistakes I've made in the past, like I've followed a bunch of subjects that never became movies. So as I've gotten more experienced, I'm like really picky with what I'm going to spend 4 years of my life on. Um, you know, with Kenny Anderson and Mr. Chibbs, it was a no-brainer. He very famous NBA star, 15 years in the NBA, lost everything because he was an alcoholic, had just this very Kenny and I just really clicked, oddly enough. People would not think so, but I grew up in a very pro basketball family and on Long Island, and he was from Queens. And so that really helped was just our relationship. Like we really bonded. And I found his story fascinating. And I felt like somebody where I want to know more. I want to know your life story. I want to know like how you made it and how you lost everything.
But at that point, were you like, oh, this is a feature film that I'm gonna do?
For that one, it was weird because I was brought in by two producers who had introduced me to Kenny.
Hmm.
And we just, yeah, as soon as I met him, I wanted to do it. And I knew his story was a feature film. But like I did this other film where I followed a woman running for Congress in New Jersey for a year right after Hillary Clinton lost. All these women were running. And I never made that film. I got amazing footage and I filmed for a year.
Mm.
And then I just realized, election docs are so difficult because they're not tangible and it's important during the time. And then you forget about these candidates or, and because she lost. And it was a much bigger doc and I didn't find funding. And I was questioning it the whole time whether the character was interesting enough to hold a, a feature with this Julie's doc. I mean, it was also her story merited a feature. As you probably know, some stories merit like a short and some merit a feature. I couldn't tell her story in 10 minutes. Like it was a whole life. And again, she was an interesting character. It's the person. And it's also the access and it's also the trust. I make a lot of biographical
Mm.
docs. So for me, it's really bonding with the person and figuring out also what does an audience want to see this? Would they be interested in this person's life?
Interesting. And yeah, Nick, like sort of to follow up on this, because I think a lot of people often are kind of confused about like topics. Like people ask me a lot, like, how do you find these topics? How do you know that it could be a feature length film? I mean, if you're doing a documentary on, NFTs, like how do you even think about that as in terms of like what the idea is to make a full film and how do you approach that in terms of like, okay, I'm going to go make a feature on this and what are those questions that are coming up for you?
Yeah, good question. And every movie that I've made, directed or produced has gone through some type of like initial excitement. This is a movie, and then gone into some kind of valley of the shadow of death where
Yeah.
there was total confusion and uncertainty about whether there was any movie there at all, even a
And
short or
just to
maybe a
echo
short.
what
Yeah,
Jill was said, I feel like every doc filmmaker I know has like their projects that they started, shot, filmed, and weren't decided not to pursue it.
of course. Yeah, and even Not Going Quietly, it's this very linear character story about one man's hero's journey from kind of A to B, as you'll audiences will see in the film, of the course of his life and the birth of his children and his decline from this disease. A very straightforward story, and yet none of that unfolded in the way it unfolds in the film in my psyche or any of the team's psyche. It had to be created and constructed in the editorial process, as you guys well know. Even a story that seems, oh, this is obviously a movie, I think is anything but. But in terms of what topics to pursue and the question about, Jill, you're absolutely right. Not just is this a story that needs to be told, but is it one that needs to be heard? Is this marketable? Is there an audience for it? Has this film been made already? What I think that comes down to is really access, trust, and perspective. And those are the kind of three things I would ask yourself, because similarly to you guys and audience in the room, when I did when I was coming up, people will pitch me an idea for a documentary or tell me that they have one. And I think it's okay if that movie is being, if many people there, and there certainly were, by the way, and are many people making movies about NFTs. But I had a sort of specific perspective and a certain level of access to parts of that story. And so I think it's important to kind of go deeper than the topic layer. I really love fantasy football. And I think somebody should do a doc. It's a big topic. That's great. But then what is your perspective? What's your access point to the story? And then what's your trust level with that person to do it in a way that's, or people in a way that's revelatory and is not what the same audiences could discover through that person's public presence. The
Mm.
documentary, by necessity of the medium, wants to go deeper than the news magazine show or the YouTube video. And that comes down to that trust level.
I, yeah, and this is something I want to ask both of you. How do you gain the trust of these subjects? And Nick, you've definitely in your films, you have access to characters that I imagine other people have been wanting to make films on. People ask me the same question. They're like, how did, in the case of Secret Mall Apartment, there was filmmakers trying to make that project for nearly 20 years before the subject said okay to me. And
Yeah. I think I heard in the Q&A there was like 70 other applications before
Wow.
Jeremy Workman came along and
not
was
70, but it was over 20.
okay.
Yeah, and including some big streamers had come to those guys. And yeah, for anyone watching or listening, that this is a movie about this group of 8 artists who secretly lived inside a busy mall in the early 2000s, and they created a secret space and they lived there for 4 years and they filmed it. And then one of them got caught, and then it became a little bit of like a public story, mostly where it happened in Providence, Rhode Island. But and this, like I said, happened in the early 2000s.
It's an incredible tale. Artists set up an apartment inside Providence Place Mall, going undetected for years. We all hated the mall when it went up, right? Nobody wanted that to happen.
Shortly after, a developer comes in and says, I'm gonna knock down your home.
I just had this idea, oh, we should live in the mall.
It seemed like a very absurd fantasy and perhaps a great challenge. When the mall was being built, I saw a space that I could not figure out what it would be used for. We went looking for that anomaly in the architecture, and we snuck ourselves in there, and we took out our flashlights. And there it was. It started the conversation immediately.
We need to develop this underutilized space.
There was a real necessity to build a wall there.
It was like 5,000 pounds of cinder blocks.
It's important to emphasize there's this underlying sense of dread that we're going to get caught at any time.
Wow. So what is it? Is it a prank? Is it a work of art? Is it a social experiment?
It was like this alternate universe that's within the real world.
It talks about gentrification, capitalism, everything being commodified.
The apartment was the side project to the other stuff.
We were like a little elite strike force team of empathetic artists.
Such a magic thing to take a space from the mall.
Holy smoke.
For like 17, 18 years after, people were trying to get this movie made. And for reasons that I want to also hear from you, I was able to kind of build the trust with the subjects and, kind of go to them and convince them that I was the person to make the movie. But, I think this is a very like underrated aspect of documentary filmmaking is getting subjects to feel comfortable. And I can imagine people who haven't made films like us, that's a big challenge is convincing subjects. So, why don't we start, Jill? How did you go about kind of earning the trust of your subjects and getting them to sort of say yes to making a film on them, which is this really intrusive process. You're running around with cameras around them and dealing with their personal life.
It's super intrusive and it never gets easier, even after they say yes. I look at it as a collaboration. And, I think the director has to have artistic control because you need to create the film and write the film. But I do think somebody's lending their life to you. They're on camera and they have to trust you. And so it's a lot of explanation. It's a lot of talking through what we're doing. It's a lot of being together without the camera rolling as well, even though I'm so tempted because a lot of those times
Mm.
they say things that you just want to shoot, and sometimes they do take out the camera. But it's I'm starting. With Julie, it was easier because she was my mother-in-law, but she was my former mother-in-law, and she was in her 90s, and a lot of people wanted to make her documentary. It's founding editor of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. She was 93 when we filmed with her. I would promise her, we moved in with her and we filmed her during the last couple of years of her life. And so basically we had the camera like set up on sticks in any room we were at. And when she would, there were times we would just start rolling, but she was very aware of the camera because she worked with the cameras her whole life. And there were times she'd be like, turn that off, like in her 90s, and I would. So she gained, it's a give and take. And sometimes you are giving up some really good footage for the trust of the subject, but also it's like sometimes you've got to just go for it and keep the cameras rolling, even when you're questioning yourself. There's a lot of times too, it's like for, Beyond the Gaze too. My ex-husband was in the other room as we're filming with his mother, and he wasn't very easy he allowed us to do the doc. He was into the doc, but when we first started filming, because I'm filming with my new husband, who's my partner, and my former mother-in-law, and
There's some
like
drama. Yeah,
it was
yeah. It's
drama. It
complicated.
was really hard to navigate. And like there were times like we'd be filming with her and he'd have like the football game on in the other room going full blast. There were a couple of times I'm like, could you lower the TV? And he'd be like, no. And I was like, okay, those are the boundaries. I can't piss him
Yeah.
off. Like I'm getting really good stuff. So I'm like, all right, I have to deal with this.
Are you bored?
Bored? No, I'm never bored. I'm agitated lots of times because I can't do the things I used to do. If I were a normal person again, I don't feel like a normal person anymore. I feel like a shell. But I'm very grateful I'm a shell. I could be a piece of dust too.
Are you losing your memory? Are you scared of that?
No. I think as you get older, you get more memory. Because there are a lot of things that were wonderful or horrible, but you never had the time to relive them. Very often, I could sit there in my chair and I'm alone and I decide what I want to think about that day.
I think you probably both relate. Like there's people that feel nervous about being filmed and
Mm-hmm.
and nervous about filming something very intimate, and then they see the film and they love it. Like Kenny Anderson, the whole time his wife would call me and say like, don't I don't want to, elaborate on his drinking. I don't want to ruin his career. He still wants to coach. Please be careful. And I had to listen to that, but I also had to tell the truth of his story. And I was really nervous the first time he saw that film that they were going to just flip out.
Mm.
And he loved it. And he looked at me and he's like, you could go more raw, go more raw.
Nice.
So so it's like, I guess it's learned the more you do this, and as you both know, it's like listening to that like your inner core, your inner instincts when you're in that moment, and knowing, and also like you don't have to, you could always not, it's better to have something on film because you could always not use it instead of not getting it. So I don't know how you both feel, but I know that you're similar filmmakers. So
Yeah, and I want to hear Nick also like how you. I mean, especially with like Addie Barkin. But before you jump into that, I mean, one of the things that I sort of feel, and it's funny because I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this are coming from like almost like a scripted movie perspective or point of view, and I always feel like that world seems so like easy in a way because somebody's just setting something up for you and you're getting this location and everybody who's in front of the camera wants to be in front of the camera. And you don't have to navigate this very, very tricky space where like you're filming something that is by definition like invasive. You're filming a documentary, you're exposing them to in film. So it's very different from a scripted movie where everybody's like there and signed up to be there. And you have to kind of again navigate this very tricky landscape where you're trying to convince subjects to be in the film. You want to get the best material, you want to go deeper and deeper and deeper, but you also have to balance all these sort of, you know, personal challenges and professional things, and there's all kinds of unethical landmines everywhere. So it just makes it very, very difficult. One of the jokes that I have about documentary filmmakers is that we're like the nicest, coolest, you know, we're not a-holes, because if we were, there would be literally no chance that anyone would ever allow us to make a movie. But yeah, Nick, I wonder if you could kind of talk a little about this too. With Not Going Quietly, you know, Addie was dying and also a public figure, and here you are following him and, you know, thrusting your cameras towards, you know, everything that he's doing. So I guess just how did you navigate that space in terms of your relationship with the subject?
Sure. There was a really great moment when we did our Q&A for the film years later, after our first meeting, where I think it was with Jimmy Kimmel, who asked him, Adi, why did you let these people into your life? It's so vulnerable, it's so raw, it's so painful. And Adi said, it took a long time and a lot of conversations. And ultimately, I sat down with my wife, Rachel, and our 2 kids, and we discussed what this would mean for our family to open up our lives and our experience and our pain in this way to the world. And ultimately, I decided the most important thing was to be rich and famous, and this documentary might help me get there.
Now, I want to have a chance to tell the story about my friend, Addie Barkan.
He's been an activist and an organizer all of his life.
With us today is Addie Barkan. I can't do Addie's story justice. I will let him tell it.
After Carl was born, we felt like we had reached the mountaintop.
Say hi.
And then, out of the clear blue sky, we were struck by lightning.
I was diagnosed with ALS today.
The knowledge that I was dying was terrible. But dealing with my insurance company was even worse. I wanted to spend every moment I had left with Rachel and Carl. But then Congress came after our health care. I couldn't stay quiet any longer.
My next guest made headlines when he confronted a Republican senator on an airplane.
This is your moment to be American hero. All right, ready to rumble.
We decided to start a movement
To urge people to stand up, confront the elected officials. All right, I'm gonna knock on your door.
Did you just get out of jail? Are you gonna keep protesting on Monday?
Yeah.
What do we want? Healthcare!
I am willing to give my last breath to save our democracy. What are you willing to give?
Liz, I'm having trouble breathing.
I just think we have to stop.
Our time on this earth is the most precious resource we have.
Carl, I love you so much. Movement building allows me to transcend my body, and that's the beauty of democracy, that together we can be more than our individual selves.
The paradox of my situation is, the weaker I get, the louder I become.
Who's that?
to me, semblance of truth that's relevant to audiences and the answer to this question about building trust and access, which is that for the most part, the films, I mean, of course, there's situations where you're doing an adversarial investigation and trying to get into the opposing camp, and that's sort of different than what I'm about to say. But when it comes to the protagonist of your story, whether it's your mother-in-law, Jill, or whether it's Lily or Matt Green, or the story of the artists in Secret Mall apartment, I think that there's usually a shared overlapping objective or aim, which is to bridge the world with the story and impact and personal experience of the person who's agreeing to being in the film. And every film that I've made, there's always been at the heart a Venn diagram, a sliver between my interests in making a film that will sell to a streamer, get me recognized at a film festival, advance my storytelling career and interests and be exciting for me to work on, and some sliver that connects with what that participant, or what we used to call subjects, want. I think we're not supposed to call them that anymore, which is generally to be given some type of platform or lens to translate what it is that they want to share with the world. And it doesn't always match, but there is that core shared value and vision. And from the very beginning, with Adi, it was actually quite easy because of that kind of joke that he made, which is that telling his story in a public way about his ALS to Senator Jeff Flake, and had become this sort of viral face of the healthcare movement. So it wasn't a big leap for him to understand that his personal pain was this tool to galvanize public opinion. That was kind of what his whole movement was about. And that, pushed its way all the way into me being in the bathroom with him when he couldn't get off the toilet, and things that for other people would be totally mortifying, but for him had this really inherent understanding. And so I try to find with everybody who I work on a film with, what is that shared platform that we have? They may not understand the artistic avenue of the film. They may not understand why I want to do this one shot, or why I need them to go look out the window for a moment. And so I have a moment of them, or please stop talking on this car ride so I can get a reflective B-roll shot of you. That might not mean anything to them, but it does mean something if you understand what they're moving through the world to try to communicate, and you share your values and your vision and how your artistry built on that foundation of trust is going to help achieve that objective. And I've tried to do that with every film. I've worked with undocumented immigrant populations, as I mentioned earlier, where there's huge risks and caveats to going public in their story. And it has to loop back at the end to when this story is revealed through you empowering me with trust to the world, it's going to help usually other people that are in similar circumstances to understand, to build empathy and combat xenophobia and all the other, I think, kind of noble ideals we have when we try to share the human experience through film.
I think that's
that very well said. I was just going to say that my new movie is taking me into a lot of that space, which is about a population group that's I can't speak much about it, but it's about refugees, and it's just very different from the other projects I've done. And, that's really kind of throwing me for a loop in terms of understanding kind of that positioning as a director quite a bit. So yeah, I could understand that. Jill, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say that's a really good question to ponder at the beginning when you're asking what to take on. And I'm kind of contemplating 2 new subjects right now, and one I'm pretty positive I'm going to go forward with, and one I'm not really sure. And I've done a couple of shoots, and I'm not sure if the subject is a likable protagonist. I don't know if the subject has to be the main subject.
Yeah, is that something you need?
I don't know. I don't know. The story is fascinating, and I can't share it yet. I could share it off camera, but it's a fascinating story
Yeah.
having to do with a very, very famous person, and this person committed a crime against them, and I have access to the person who committed the crime.
Gotcha.
Um, I've never also done true crime, so maybe that's a question that comes up with true crime.
I mean, true crime is now sort of like, swallowing our industry in such a way. And like everybody knows that like so many of these platforms are hyper focused on true crime. I have never done true crime. Nick, I don't know if you're, you know,
No, investigative
sure.
type work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not crime per se as a focus.
So it is something that there's just this like huge appetite for audiences. So yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I would want to do it. Like,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
it would sell, but it's like, yeah, it's just kind of figuring out why would an audience be interested in this, or
Yeah.
would that person be able to carry a whole film?
Right, totally. And this really dovetails into like sort of this next topic that I kind of want to hit, which is about like funding. And it's this really tricky question. And everybody has questions about that. Like how do you do the fundraising? Is there one way? People have heard about just you find a topic and you get, as we've mentioned, you get some subject or access point, and you have this, subject material, and you feel like there's buy-in from the subject for you to do a documentary, and then you take it to some streamer, and then they write a big check, and you go and make a documentary. And it just seems like that is not really the way that people are making documentaries these ways. Documentaries tend to be like a lot more scrappier, and they're sometimes challenging on the funding side. Part of it has to do with that documentaries don't always make their money back, and they can be more of a challenging investment compared to something that like has movie stars or is a genre scripted movie. So like funding, what I've discovered is that with like so many filmmakers I know, funding is from all sources, and everybody seems to have different approaches. I think I made a decision, God, it was from a few films ago, like maybe like 4 films ago, it was my first experience where I had private equity investors, where people who were interested in the subject, they could put money towards a film. They wanted to make their money back. It was not charity. And I always have framed it as this is an investment. We're trying to, make a movie that can return revenue, all those things. And I think in around 2015, 2016, I started to see that it was working for me to be able to go to private equity individuals mostly and try to, cobble together the budgets that I need to make the films. And then lo and behold, I was able to even make profit on my films. And that very much was a way for me to then raise more money and go to other individuals. And, once that kind of ripple effect started, I was able to kind of raise money from other sources and other individuals. And that's been how I've been doing it for a decade. I have not gone to the big streamers yet and said, hey, I'm doing this project, and can you write me a check for $1 million? Those days, after the pandemic, as a lot of people know, there was this kind of, it was kind of this heyday of documentary filmmaking, and there was a lot of budgets that were skyrocketing between like $1 and $3 million to do documentary features. And those days have kind of dropped a little bit, and those funding opportunities are less and less with streamers doing going funding in that way now. So now I kind of go to individuals still, also exploring, starting to sort of explore partners with streamers, and use the fact that I have a bit of a track record to try to raise funding. But it's always a challenge, and it's always different. I have felt that it's really important for me to kind of maintain autonomy and creative, kind of have a real sense of like creative control a little bit with my team and not just open it up to, what the streamers are after. But it is a real struggle sometimes. So I'd love to hear like how you guys are thinking about fundraising, knowing that things, it changes, month to month, it seems, in our industry. But let's say you have a project, Nick, that you're starting to feel like, oh, wow, this is something that is really meaningful and impactful and, audiences want to see it. What would be your step then to try to raise funding?
It's a great question. Of course, it's the most important question, unfortunately, because the project can't happen for the most part without that. And I think it's important that you mentioned, Jeremy, you having a track record and that we distinguish the answer to this question for first-time filmmakers versus seasoned documentary filmmakers, because I think the approach is a little bit different. For first-time filmmakers, and to a lesser extent as well but certainly for first time, and then for most projects, even with seasoned filmmakers, there is no traditional funding source available, period. And by traditional, I mean people or streamers or investors or donors or grants that are generally interested in supporting documentary that will support your project. It's virtually non-existent from my perspective, and I would be happy to be wrong about this. And what that means is that the only people who will support your project, especially as a first-time filmmaker, are people who are closely connected to or passionate about the specific subject matter or person or mission or impact goal that you're trying to achieve. Your project will, not unless you have the most incredible or exclusive access to the most commercial, most grisly murder of all time, your project will not pre-sell at the script stage to a Netflix. No streamer will buy your idea. Even if you have an amazing sizzle reel, they still won't buy it because there are a huge imbalance of supply and demand, oversupply of documentary, and the executives at all of the streamers who you might think as a regular audience member are buying up lots of documentaries are actually not. And the ones that they are, they're receiving hundreds of pitches a day and only get fired for saying yes to the wrong thing. So what that means that you should do practically is you need to identify a non-traditional funding list of the people who care about this thing. So if your topic is about anti-Semitism or any other issue that there are lots of people who care about, you should find not people interested in funding documentaries, but people interested in supporting anti-Semitism, and show how your project will advance that cause as opposed to the film itself. At least this is the approach that I've taken, just to be practical, with all of my films, including, as my track record established more and more over time. Not Going Quietly was funded by people who care about healthcare activism and advocacy and progressive politics. Later on, we got some traditional investor capital from the Duplass brothers and others, but even they were interested in progressive politics and activism because they knew it would be very unlikely, unless you're Jeremy Workman, to return a profit on the film. It's a very small sliver of films that do that. But that doesn't mean that all hope is not lost. It just means to think about your project the way you might think about a nonprofit or another type of art that's mission driven and that's supported by sort of either philanthropic or mission aligned funding. And I did that even with the NFT project, where with Minted found folks who were involved and interested in helping the world understand about crypto art. The vast majority of them had never been a part of the film industry before or had funded documentaries before. And how do you find these people? It's easy. Well, if it's the anti-Semitism idea, then go to the synagogue or look at the other anti-initiatives and look at that funding list and cold email them. There are ways to get access to people, and I don't want to leave a message of doom and gloom. I just think it's total like grit and hustle and spreadsheets and cold DMs and networking. That is like the nature of this business for reasons we can talk more about, but that's the practical advice I would give to people. There's often many tools to use, which it's probably worth every first-time filmmaker knowing about fiscal sponsorship. And I'll pass it back to you, Jeremy, and to Jill, if you want to get into what that is, but ways to receive philanthropic donors. So that's kind of the summation of my advice is resilience and grit and non-traditional avenues.
Totally. And that definitely gels with my own approach too, which is, again, it's hustle, it's meeting people, it's going to non-traditional sources. But Jill, in our cases, unlike Nick's, where, you know, our films are more, some of them are more character driven, they're less social, they don't have necessarily a social issue behind it, though both of our films, all our films have social issue textures and layers. But how are you thinking about fundraising, on your projects?
I agree with Nick. Like, that's how I've gotten funding for everything was, for Mr. Chibbs. I want to add to that is like, you should first have a good sizzle, a good deck, and a website and a social media presence as soon as possible. And that's how I got funding for Chibbs, was because Kenny would just post all the time pictures. We bought all our own equipment, and that's another word of advice for young filmmakers is like, whatever you could afford, a camera, a good boom, good microphone, so you could film yourself. You're not relying
learn some skills.
Learn some skills. I know how to edit. I've edited, I save money that way, but I always put together a sizzle and a deck and a website and a presence as soon as possible. And
even if you haven't filmed anything?
No, I film. I film enough to get a good sizzle.
You film for like a sizzle. And when I say sizzle, if anybody doesn't know, that's like usually like a 4 or 5 minute, trailer pitching the project. Some
like
filmmakers I know don't even
does
shoot
all the time.
Yes. But some of them don't even shoot for sizzles. They just kind of rip footage but you would shoot?
I'm shooting for sizzles for both these projects right now. I'm shooting for the doc, but I'm like, I own the equipment, so it's not costing me anything. And I'm going to and situations are coming up with the subjects that I want to film. So my goal is then create a sizzle, create a deck, create a social media presence for Mr. Chibbs. Kenny posted all the time, and we got this man who owned a trucking company in New Jersey who was a super fan, who basically funded the whole film because we were out there and people knew about the project. I do think it's super hard, and that's why I said before, I'm very intentional now with the projects I'm picking, because I think funding's harder than ever right now with people, the economy, people not knowing what's going on. Like you said, nobody's buying films. You're not getting commissioned. Jeremy, do you think having an executive producer, a famous one, helps? I've heard
yes,
that.
I do. So in my case, a lot of people saw that with Secret Mall Apartment, the actor Jesse Eisenberg was an executive producer, and he's a friend of mine. He also executive produced another film that we've mentioned, The World Before Your Feet. So he and I like had this relationship and friendship, and he loves the projects that I do, and he really gets behind them in a way that is incredible. He supports them, not financially, but he will pick up the phone and make calls. He'll do marketing. He'll reach out to festival programmers. He'll reach out to streamers and companies. He'll show up and do Q&As. And what I found was that having somebody like his, with his stature involved in a project can be just really helpful There's a lot of competition with documentaries. As Nick said, there's like way more supply than there is demand, and that's a good thing. People, filmmaking equipment's become cheaper and it's easier now to make movies, but yet there's just more and more documentaries out there, and you have to, I always think of ways like how can we find ways to, kind of game the system a little bit, like to kind of figure out ways that, I'm going to get my film the attention that I want it to get. And certainly having somebody like a celebrity executive producer can be incredibly helpful. Jesse would come on board my films early. So I would show him rough cuts. I tell him about the topics, but there's other cases, for the documentary that I did called Lily Topples the World, the executive producer was Kelly Marie Tran, who people know. She was in Star Wars. She's in Raya and The Last Dragon. She's this great actress and also produces. She came on board pretty late and then became this like terrific advocate for the film. So, it's just part of like what I think Nick has mentioned as well, where you're always having to kind of like hustle a little bit. You have to kind of game plan. You're thinking of ways to get, find a way for your film to find some daylight. And whatever method you could come up with is going to help.
All of this means, and what I'm really inspired about your work, Jeremy, is it means kind of eliminating or avoiding or not worrying about gatekeepers or middlemen or like approvers in general, both on the fundraising and on the distribution side, right? Everything that people in the creator economy are doing to get millions of views to get their work seen, or to crowdfund projects or whatever it might be, is something translatable into the feature-length documentary space. And it's certainly true with what you did on the distribution side, Jeremy, which I bring up only because I now consider you basically the world's leading expert on documentary self-distribution, as evidenced by the numbers. But it's the same idea on the front end.
So just to interrupt, with Secret Mall Apartment, we self-distribute it. We didn't wait for a company. We self-distributed ourselves, and we ended up doing really well and then earning the lion's share of that. And that was a bold move that isn't right for every film, but it was right for that film, and it worked out.
I think from what I saw you did, because I agree with you, Nick, like you created a textbook sample of how it's great what you did. It's great what you did for the community. But it's, it looks like you created, like you found your audience and created this buzz with your audience, and they showed up like at theaters across America.
They did.
You also, distributors were telling us all, you can't do a theatrical. Nobody's showing up to theaters, right? And it's great to point to your film and say, yes, they do show up to theaters if you create the event, you create the film, you create the buzz around it. And that kind of inspired me because we were on the theatrical around the same time, and mine was much smaller. And I guess my question is, it sounds like that was your plan from the beginning. We really did think we were going to just sell our film because, again, I worked with your partner Rob Lyons, and he was a producer on my film, and things were selling when we started our film, and we had a very commercial film with all these famous supermodels, and we did well with it. But so we didn't prepare in that way, although we did still have a great theatrical. We did this great thing with AMC Artisan, where they did a one-night theatrical across the country at 35 theaters. But I think what you did is textbook, and I think a lot of people should study that and should be prepared to do that in the beginning.
Oh,
and
thanks. Yeah.
Some might say you need a subject that can create that buzz. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, I mean, definitely, I agree. You know, it was the right movie for that. You know, we had this movie that was like, you know, Secret Mall Apartment. It was like a heist movie, and it was entertaining and fun, and it had all these like was like memes were coming out about it. So we just felt like it was the right material for that. But you know, I couldn't tell you. You know, I mean, when my business partner Rob was working on Beyond the Gaze with you, I also was like, this seems like absolutely, of course, this is going to find this huge audience. And I think it has a lot to do with like the audience have changed. It's not just distribution has changed. Like people are going to the theater less for documentaries. People are seeing less documentaries. And yeah, so I think it's important for anyone who wants to get into documentary. It is about what Nick you said, you know, like not trying just to listen to the gatekeepers, to be scrappy and decide like how can you subvert the system? How can you do it on your own? What are the ways that you could figure out, you know, the positioning, thinking about, you know, all the stuff that we've already been talking about for like the last, you know, 45 minutes or whatever, where it's so much about thinking about the marketing, the positioning. That's part of being a documentary filmmaker. Again, a scripted movie filmmaker doesn't really have to worry about those things. They could just come in and, you know, film their scenes and work with actors. And it's tough, I'm sure, but it's not where you're like thinking about all these sort of, you know, issues about how are you going to get the film out, how are you going to market it, how are you going to position it, how are you going to find audience. You have to really take on, wear a lot of hats as a documentary.
I think the other important thing, you mentioned your business partner, Jeremy, and I'm sure, Jill, you have other close collaborators, but is to sort of find and identify your tribe on the film behind the camera. Funders are a piece of that equation, but there's also this really important idea of identifying a producer, a writer, of course, other people below the line, cameras and camera operators and sound people and all of that. And I emphasize this because I just think that documentary filmmaking is a team sport. And it's nice that we have all these directors here. But building that team is one of the ways that you can solve and navigate a lot of these problems. And you might say, oh, well, I don't have the money, I can't have the team. And I think people are actually really incentivized by credits on film. Part of the reason that there's so many, such a oversupply of documentaries versus demand is in part because documentary filmmaking is really fucking cool. And I think it's one of the, maybe going back to the campfire days, just being a storyteller is a privileged position in society, and people want it. And you have a great currency if you have an amazing project to give people the opportunity to help you produce it, help you write it, help you shoot it, and all of those things. And your relationships with those people is really what's going to carry the project from the beginning to the end, trying to navigate those carefully, incentivizing those people with credits, maybe paying them later on once you've raised the money, giving them executive or producer credits that they feel like real stake and ownership, sharing some of the glory with them at the end. These are really important lessons that I've learned and I think are critical to a film happening in the end result, at least in the way that I work. And the other related point.
Do you work with the same cinematographers and editors and, you know, craftspeople that's on all the same project, on all your projects?
Not necessarily, but I have. I've worked with, on my features, I've worked with a different editor on each, and those are very intimate and long-term relationships, which, being that this is the Manhattan Edit Workshop, we could probably have a whole 90-minute discussion about documentary editing, which is not where we've been focused. But
we've done that too. We had Carly Gutierrez, and we've
awesome.
had some great talks about that.
Yeah. So I've changed it up, but I've maintained a sort of relevant ecosystem around my work, who I have repeated work with, cinematographers certainly, and everybody else in the list of collaborators that I just mentioned. And one piece I'll just say in terms of 101 that I just wanted to add, it's just relevant to panels that I've been on and other discussions I've been having in the industry is don't forget to have agreements with those people in writing. You and a friend might be thinking about teaming up on a documentary, and it might not be super clear who's directing and who's producing and who's financing and who owns it and who has creative control. And Jill, I know you talked about that earlier. That also applies in your relationship with your subject. But this is something I really think is good advice to new filmmakers is to write things down with even in an email, with the people that you're making a film with. These can be 1, 2, 3, 5, or 10-year journeys of your life. So
people don't realize that if you don't have an agreement and I take you on as a producer, you can claim ownership of the project. If I don't have a work for hire agreement with somebody, and that might be fine. That might be your intention to share that, but that's where things get super messy. I agree. Agreements are key. And now with AI, I hate to say it, but they're pretty easy to even figure that out. And also another thing is budget. I think it's really interesting how young filmmakers are like, if I just got $1 million, I can make this film, or $500,000. And it's like, well, please know how to create a budget for that, because that's just as important too, because if you run out of the money for a certain specific thing that you need in your film, or you haven't budgeted properly, it affects the creative side. It affects the film. And it's also proving to the person who's giving you that money that you know what you're doing with it. And they're hard. Budgets are hard. Like I learn with each film, and each budget is different. I don't know if you want to both say anything about that, but
yeah, I mean, I think just kind of understanding that side has been really important for me as well. Like understanding where the money goes, how you're spending it, how you're hiring all these collaborators, bringing them on, how much it costs day to day to have a cinematographer, because then you start in your own brain, you're directing the movie and you're thinking like, okay, how much do I have, how many days am I going to film with that person? Do I have time to film with them in this additional way? Could I go travel with them to this for whatever reason? And all that is now informed by the budget. So just kind of like understanding that, we're talking about crew and we're talking about, working with collaborators. What is even directing mean in a way for you in this kind of documentary context? Like, what does it mean to direct a documentary?
That's a great question. I think what you said, crew is part of it, because when you're directing a documentary, my goal is for the subject, for everyone to forget that the camera and the crew is there. So I really like a small crew, like as small as possible. Like sometimes I won't even hire a production assistant because they just get in the way sometimes. I mean, sometimes they're really helpful. But it's having collaborators where, like, I do work with Nelson Walker a lot, who's a great cinematographer, and I've worked with him on all my films. And I work with my husband, Greg, as a cinematographer, and I don't really have to say much. I trust that if I set it up right, if I set the scene and the situation up and we talk about it, like Nelson, Greg, and I will discuss before we go in what my goals are, what I'm trying to get out of the scene, what my questions are, what my insecurities are. I'm very open with them about everything. And then hopefully I've hired people that will do their job. I've learned early on with cinematographers, like they do not like it if you're whispering in their ear and telling them what shot to get as they're shooting. And so I try to work with cinematographers where you don't have to do that, where I know that they know what they're doing. And then also you go home and you look at the dailies and you look at, I'll go home and I'll look at the dailies and I'll be like, we should have gotten this shot, and next time let's focus on that.
Oh, yeah,
I'll right? Do you? Okay.
Oh,
yeah. Like, damn, why didn't I do that? Why wasn't I focusing on that? And it's like, it's art. You're always trying to get that perfect shot. It's like tennis. You're always trying to get that perfect shot, and it's always elusive, but when you get it, it's amazing. So yeah, it's the collaborators. I mean, I could tell a story like I was trying to, you know, I was trying to work with a lot of women on my last film because it's about feminism and sexism and objectification, and I just wanted a very female set. And I mean, I could be really honest. Maybe we'll cut this, but I had Rob and Nelson and Greg, and I love them, and they're like my guys. And but I was like, I need to work with women. I need to work with women. So we had this one shoot in LA where it was me and just women. I didn't have a PA. It was just women, and it was hell. Like something happened where the mis it just didn't go right. The miscommunication, the vibe, I don't know. So it was like it taught me a lesson too. It's like just work with people you're comfortable with. Don't go for the, I don't know, the PC kind of crew. It's like you need to work with people who are going to help you get what you need. And you get that vibe once. I'm sure you all know that, like when you're working with a certain cinematographer, that it just works. And then
Just
there's
clicks,
others where it just doesn't, where it's like you're just not jiving and they're not getting your vision, or they're questioning you too much, or I'm very much on like, I don't want, when I'm working on somebody's set, my goal is to help them be the best artist that they could be. And I am there, and to really help them create their art as a producer, as whatever team member I am. And that's what I look for in the team members that I hire. And then if I don't get that, I just can't work with them again, because I just can't have this shit in my head. It's too hard. I can't think like, why did they talk to me like that? Why did they snap at me? Why can't they just, I've set up this whole damn thing. You know how hard that was? I got the funding. I'm paying you. You're here. Like, we're doing this. And now you're just like pressing. Yeah. So it's hard, man. It's hard. But yeah.
Yeah, Nick, what about you? Like, what is it for you, like sort of directing mean, and kind of creating that authenticity kind of on set? Like, what does that mean?
For me, it's really about being in the moment, in the room with the participant and the crew, but also being in the movie theater 18 months or 3 years later, or in the edit room in between those two stages. And it's about pushing really hard to get that thing that is going to be meaningful for those audiences later. And sometimes it means really fighting, like pushing past the police barricade to get, or get into the congressman's office, because even though it's risky in the moment, the audience at the end deserves to get that look, that view. And that's the same with pushing past people's emotional barriers or challenges, or digging deeper in an interview, is to like connect that moment that you are lucky enough and privileged enough to be in, and translate it to the end person, who actually I think we're really serving. We talk a lot about the relationship with the participants, and we haven't today, but about ethical guidelines and how to treat documentary subjects, which again is worthy of its own discussion and something I take really seriously. But I also feel like we have an obligation to the audience at the end to give them something incredible, to give them something that's worth getting home on Friday night and not watching, Real Housewives of, Bachelor City, and instead watching your documentary, and giving streamers a reason to buy these movies, and audiences a reason to talk about them at work, and make it part of the zeitgeist and part of the water cooler culture, so that we can restore this industry. So it's like, that's kind of like the big picture for me, is just make an amazing film that people have to watch, have to buy, have to talk about. We're here to entertain and uplift and inspire and change the world. So you really have to give it your all when you're in the field. And that can mean going up against it with your crew to get that shot, even if the DP doesn't want to hear it. And it can mean telling your subject to go, deeper onto a place or feeling or experience in order to serve the needs of the audience at the end. I think that's an important part that's not maybe always expressed as much, and I like to talk about.
Me too. And I think that's been something that's been really important to me, is kind of like understanding that, like, when you make a film, any film, it really is for an audience, and you're making a pact with an audience, and you're asking them to sit, in our cases, for 90 minutes, which is an incredible amount of time.
Totally.
Incredible. It's,
Yeah.
and
try not to
them,
look at your other screen while you're doing that.
and there's so much good material and other movies and other options for them to do something. So you're creating this trust with your audience too, and that's kind of baked into the process. And the more that you feel like you're honoring that trust and you're thinking about that trust, it's going to come out better on screen with your film. And that trust might mean challenging them. It might mean entertaining them. It might be, in cases with me, often trying to bring them into worlds that maybe are not easily accessible to them, and introduce them to characters that maybe people wouldn't normally get to meet, and trying to really create this shared understanding between me and an audience, so that they feel like, wow, when they're sitting down and giving me that time, my movie is going to earn it. And I think that's really important. Nick, are you, just a practical thing, do you like talk into the ear of your cinematographer? Do you tell your subjects, like, hey, I want to get this shot? Do you have a shot list?
Yeah.
Or do you just go in and you're just kind of, create, when you're in a scene?
Shot list, yes, where appropriate. And also, yes, talk to cinematographer. I mean, I think the point Jill is raising is a important one, that you want your creative collaborators to add something. They're not just there to hold a heavy piece of machinery, but to bring their own perspective and point of view. But I personally, and I'm curious for you, Jeremy, I want to be asking you more questions. You talked a lot about fiction films and the difference, but I often, when I'm in the field at least, and directing in post is its whole other thing. I mean, most of these movies come together in the edit. Most of the directing
and I want to ask about that too. So
yeah.
Jill will ask you that after this.
So that's the stuff that happens on set is, transient and a small fraction of our lives in time, at least for me. Most of it is in the dark cave. But in terms of being on set and whispering to the DP and the subjects, I tend to take a pretty proactive directing view that might reflect some of what people do in narrative films. For example, asking participants to have that conversation that they had last night again, but in that kitchen table by the window with the lamp on. And you started by saying this thing last night. Could you start the conversation again like that? And I developed more and more of a strong sense of that over time. And I think in certain subjects and certain documentaries, that type of staging can feel more contrived. It can work effectively, and that audiences are privy to it, and that creates a different element of sort of hybrid aesthetics to the film. It can be very seamless and just give you the content that you need, or it can push into territory of reenactment. But I'm, interested in pushing form. And back to this point about like entertaining and pushing the industry forward, I want these movies to be as good as the fiction films. I want them to, and I don't want to hold back or tie our hands with some type of false objectivity or journalistic rules that no other artist holds themselves to. So I tend to be, yes.
I do the same. I do the same.
I agree totally.
Yeah,
and
it's great.
I think that there's this kind of feeling amongst the documentary filmmaking community that like, it needs to be this kind of very objective journalism. And I've always been like, no, we're sort of filmmakers first, not much different from any filmmakers, whether you're writing a script or whether you're shooting nonfiction, and you have a responsibility to make a film that's going to be impactful for audience. And again, this comes back to my point about understanding that packed with audiences. So I don't at all want to just like put a camera objectively into spaces and record it. This is a director's medium as much as it is all the collaborators that you're working with. So it's very important, I think, to make films that have cinematic value as well, and that can stand alone as pieces of cinema.
You have to have a beginning, middle, and end. And because I studied narrative structure, I try to put narrative structure into every documentary. Like, what is the point of no return? What is the darkest third act point of no return? Who is the hero that's refusing the journey in the beginning? Like, you could easily, if you think about that as you're creating your film, I mean, you have that in Secret Mall Apartment. It's part of your structure. And so, yeah, I think it's really important. And I have recreated, I have done that as well. It's like, I don't think that's hurting the authenticity of the moment, because they soon forget that you've asked them to talk about that. Because if it's a fertile topic, they're going to be right in it again, and they're going to forget the camera again. And I agree. I think you learn so much the first time you see your film in a theater with an audience, and that's where I think you grow as a filmmaker. And then when your film is on a festival run and you just sit and see it like 30 times or over and over, you really learn, oh my God, that's boring. Why was that in there? Why didn't I cut that? Damn, you learn.
Well, this gets to a perfect question that I have, and it's a nice also segue, which is I'd love to hear, Jill, like how, when we've talked about like shooting and creating these, authentic moments, and sort of also the fact that you have to sometimes as a director, you have to, make sure that you're getting the moments and you're creating the kind of the content. But then you go into an edit room and you might have 300, 400, 500 hours of footage, and documentaries have this reputation that they're, made in the editing room. How do you then transition when you're trying to make your film and when you're now in the editing room and trying to put it together?
I mean, I think it's being as organized as possible. I can't, I check the footage, but for some reason I can't watch it as I go along. I watch some of it, I know what happened, but I don't know, it's too emotionally crazy. But as I edit, you learn all of your footage during the editing process. Even if you don't watch all of your footage, a lot of editors will sit down and watch every single bit of footage before they edit. I find I forget then, and it's a lot of time and it's a lot of money. So I edit. So I learn as I edit, but I also write a very strict outline. With the first act, second act, third act. I write I create all the scenes. I do the building blocks. It's a lot like narrative. It's like having cards and changing the scenes around, and the give and take of what's the compelling story and what's the story you're trying to tell, and how best are you going to tell it. And like we've said, how much is an audience going to relate to this? I want to move my audiences. My films, people cry in my films. I love that. Like, I love when people said they were in tears, or I love when there's laughter in a documentary. People are so serious with documentaries. I love when we create comic moments and moments of joy. So I think it has all of those seeds that a narrative does. But I think being organized and figuring out the structure. And it's hard because, like you said, with narrative, you have a script. And with documentary, you're dealing with real life. You don't have all of those elements.
Everything Jill said, but I think just one practical piece of advice for filmmakers that might not be very intuitive working on their movies is to have a really robust feedback process. And obviously, this idea of doing of rough cut screenings being really paramount. I think everything you described, Jill, of how are people going to react to this movie, you can test that, and you should be testing that extensively long before you send it to film festivals or try to do self-distribution. And I think the process of getting real and critical feedback that's not for the purpose of making you feel good, but for the purpose of making your movie better is kind of the only way, at least for me, to get verifiable third-party objective movies, and for me feedback and movies made. So I just really encourage new filmmakers to get that critical community around them, and then to have a very specific process, both live screenings, virtual screenings, of notes process where people can tell you all the things that you don't see. The simplest things. Where did they want to reach for their phone in their pocket while they were watching this? Because it just has to go. And those are, all the cliches about being attached and killing darlings and all that. Other people can help you with that. And I really encourage new filmmakers to go hard on that.
Definitely, no doubt. And a lot of people get nervous about that. They're like, "Oh, we're focus grouping my vision," but it becomes this really important thing. And again, it harkens back to what I was saying, where you've made a pact with an audience. So you really want to make the best film that's going to work in those ways. And I also have my own process of that. I have a very specialized process of feedback that
What is it?
Yeah,
I
I'd love
have
to
about
hear.
20 people that I trust, that I have developed over 2 decades as people that I show my films to and that I get notes from. And
I'm still waiting for the call.
And I only go to those people.
Me too.
And most of them are not they're not filmmakers, and they're not in the film
Yeah,
industry.
that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
I was
And
going
they
to
all
ask
know.
that.
I'm like, okay, hey, I'm reaching out. I got another thing for you to watch.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you need the experienced? Like,
Yep.
who do we want to
You
to give us
start
those
learning
notes?
who are really good viewers,
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been incredible. We've hit so many incredible topics, and I know, like, viewers, we don't want to keep you watching, all not on and on. So I want to wrap up, because you guys have been so generous with your thoughts and insight and time. But just to kind of wrap up here, I'd love to hear from both of you, like, some kind of like looking back reflection. What's something, maybe you wish you knew before you started making your first documentary? I always feel like that's a neat question, and it kind of reminds us, like, oh, when we're looking back, what is something that you wish you kind of knew before you started in doing documentaries? Nick, you want to kick that one off?
I would just say that it's great to find mentorship and support to ask the types of specific questions that all the audience has, after coming to a conversation like this. I wish that I had spent more time kind of building relationships with other filmmakers, watching more films, and finding more of a kind of advisory circle around my work and career. And to that extent, on a parting note, I, try to make myself available to filmmakers for types of consultation, at least informally, or helping people with their getting their foot into the industry. And so, would encourage people to stay connected with me who might see this, and reach out to me on social media, on Instagram or LinkedIn, and hop into my DMs about your movie or project, and you might get a response from me. And I'd really encourage young filmmakers to do that, not with me per se, but with filmmakers they admire and want to emulate in their work.
Oh, that's so generous. Where can people find you?
Yeah, either me personally typically on Instagram and LinkedIn at Nicholas Bruckman, or at To People's TV on all the social media platforms at peoples.tv.
Nice. And People's TV is the organization that you're working and making films under, and you have this incredible team as well. Yeah, very impressive. And yeah, any last where you'd like people to check out one of your films, where should they go?
Yeah, so you can watch Not Going Quietly on all VOD platforms, meaning Amazon Prime and Apple TV to rent and own. And you can watch Minted, The Rise and Fall of the NFT on Netflix, and The Price of Milk hopefully coming soon in 2026.
Awesome. Jill, what about you? What's something you wish you kind of knew before you started in documentary?
I mean, I'm always learning. I feel like each project, whatever you think you know, you don't know. And each project is an open book. And it's almost like you have all this experience, but you're also at the same time starting from scratch because you're working with a different subject and a different, you're just learning a whole new area to explore. I think that's basically it. And I think also right now, I think that we can make films cheaper. I think that's what I'm learning right now. I think like for a while, you hear people and they're like, my budget's 1.5, mine is 2, mine is 8. And I think that films are not going to sell that high. And I mean, it's hard. It's an imbalance again with what we're doing because it's, if you want to make a film for $300,000, you still have to hire and pay people. So how do you do like that? To me is an ideal budget right now for a documentary. So I think but at the same time, it doesn't seem possible. I mean, hiring an editor for that long could be that much money. So I think I want to learn more about how we can kind of approach budgets and approach like making our work and for a lower budget, yet paying people, yet hopefully getting it sold, getting our investors paid back. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. As much as I know nothing.
Sometimes that's good advice for people, just to remind them that like it's always a process of learning, that you don't ever have the answers, even when you've made a bunch of features, that the industry is always changing and you have to change with it and be facile and understanding and figure things out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's addictive and it's beautiful when you're in that unfortunately I love this medium, and when your film hits and moves someone and they learn and they grow from a story you're sharing, you just want to do it over and over again. And those are the joys of it. It's the best. And we're really blessed and lucky that we've had that experience. I guess that's another thing for younger filmmakers is like just kind of ask the question, what is success really? What is success in this world that we're in? I mean, we're lucky.
Good question. Yeah. It's important for us to all sort of understand what is successful and what that is for each of us, definitely. Jill, where else can people like find you, and where can they now find your films and watch them?
All my films are on VOD to Amazon, Apple. All 3 of my films are in Canopy right now. Fandango, my website for www.juliecampbell.com, or Google me, Jill Campbell, and yeah.
Thank you. And folks can find me on Instagram, Jeremy Workman _, and anyone could email me at jeremy@jeremyworkman.com. I agree with Nick, what Nick said also. Like, I've always tried to kind of like keep myself out there, talk to young filmmakers. I'm speaking at an NYU class tonight. So I think that's also important in our community, and people know it as for all of us, that we do that. And most of the doc filmmakers I know are involved in that capacity in some ways. And yeah, everybody could check out my films, check out Secret Mall Apartment. You'll have a good time. Let me know what you think. But I just want to thank you both, Jill and Nick. This was really a great chat. I'm so glad we got to sit down together. I learned a bunch just listening to you both, so I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you,
Thank
Jeremy.
you so much
Awesome to
for
meet you,
inviting
Jill.
us.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
see you
Yes,
guys
nice to meet
later.
you.
Thanks so much.
See you soon.
All right, everybody. Thanks again for watching Sight, Sound, and Story, directing and producing documentaries with Jeremy Workman, Jill Campbell, and Nicholas Bruckman. Like I said before, and I'll say it again, check out our YouTube, subscribe, look at our socials. We've got 1,000 videos on all aspects of filmmaking, from editing and cinematography to sound design and directing. More information and entertainment than you could possibly eat. So please enjoy it, and we will see you next time on Sight, Sound, and Story. I want to thank again ACE, American Cinema Editors, AJA, Edit Stock, Filmmaker U, Jason Banky, Janet Daltman for making it all happen here. And we will see you next time on Sight, Sound, and Story.